Welcome. Thank you for coming. Sorry we've had to rearrange a little bit between the flu and snowstorms and some Viacom announcements. We've been shifting. Wanted to make sure you guys still got to hear a fantastic executive today. So Vivek was kind enough to call in Lisa Scalpone from ViaSat yesterday afternoon. She drove over. We are so appreciative to have her here today, and by no means do we think that this is any different than it would have been, other than the fact that Paris and I will be sitting up here interviewing. So a little bit different format, but should still be a really great event. So thanks for the flexibility and for understanding that sometimes, as hard as we try, we can't control everything. But we're happy you guys are here today. And Lisa, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Maybe we'll just start. You can give us a brief bio and talk about your role at ViaSat.
And this is really informal too, so please, if you have questions,
Jump in.
Yeah, please.
Fireside chat. Pretend there's a fire behind us.
I'm Lisa Scalpone. I'm down the street, and I'm responsible for Viasat's Exede consumer business. So, and Viasat and Dish have a long relationship. Dish is the largest distributor for the Exede service, and Dish rebrands it as DishNet. So anyways, my background, I grew up in both California and Southern California and Chicago. I was a lawyer in Chicago, started out that way, and you know, it's not the most creative, fulfilling job to work in a large law firm in Chicago, especially I just had my son. So 15 years ago, was on a site called monster.com. It had just started up, and my husband's family was out here, so Google didn't exist, right? So I just looked for a job in Denver and came up with the old WildBlue Associate General Counsel position. And so we decided to move out here. And from then, I've kind of just stayed with WildBlue. We got acquired by ViaSat. We launched another satellite, 2 satellites. And so today, my job is responsibility for that business. It's about 450 employees, and we'll do about $500 million in revenue next year, out of which is 99% consumer with the internet service. And we kind of look like Dish, but just in a microscopic way. So we have a marketing department and customer care and field operations and logistics and analytics, finance, everything, IT, engineering. We just do it on a much smaller scale and with fewer people than here at Dish. So, but in a lot of ways, the two companies have a lot in common. It's a tech company, and you know, a lot of the same stuff we're developing relating to satellites is stuff that you guys develop too. And we're based in, our headquarters is in Carlsbad, California, where all the heavy lifting on the engineering and the IT does. So I've often told our Dish friends that Carlsbad is my Echo Star. So it's sort of a similar relationship. They supply us with all our equipment. And so that's kind of where we are today.
How did that transition go for you from being in the law world to being on the business side?
So when you work for a startup, and I know you guys sometimes do have a startup mentality, when you work for a startup, you do a lot of everything. The boundary lines aren't super clear. So I was kind of jack of all trades, master of none anyways, just knew the business inside and out. And I always volunteered to do, just out of sort of interest, curiosity, always volunteered to do the work of kind of the business people anyways. You know, do you want me to write your statement of work? Do you want me to do your PowerPoint presentation? So it's it's kind of a businessy lawyer anyways. And then when we decided to do some reshuffling, I would say, of the management team, sometimes, I don't know if you're just like the only one in the room, but you're kind of already doing a lot of the job anyways, because I was already knew the business and was doing it. So it was a pretty natural transition. And then, once you fully transition over to business from law, our current in-house counsel would say, I've forgotten everything I know, because it's very freeing, right? Not to be so beholden to the contracts and the deadlines and everything. But I still use a lot of what I learned being a lawyer, the writing skills, the negotiation skills. Negotiating's sort of a big focus, I think, of what we do, because being pretty small, we're very dependent on our contracts being good contracts. So.
Great. So on the personal side, tell us about your family.
Okay, I have 2 children. My husband I met in law school. He's still a lawyer. I have 2 children. I have a 15-year-old son, he's at East High School, and a 13-year-old daughter who is at DSA, Denver School of the Arts, in 8th grade. And let's see, they're both great.
So can you talk to us a little bit, I think just the industry as a whole is pretty male dominated in makeup and what that looks like. Can you talk to us about your team, what you look for, and then what has it been like for you as a woman in this industry? What have the struggles been? What have you encountered?
So I mean, we can all admit the obvious that I think we're doing a much better job recruiting at the junior levels, but the senior levels in tech generally have too few women, are certainly underrepresented. So, you know, one of the things that I focus on especially is the pipeline and making sure that we're getting the right training and we're making it interesting. New York Times had a great article the other day about they had done a study, how do we attract more women into tech jobs? And so they did something where they brought a woman in, had someone interview her, and then they said, are you interested in the job? And it was a coding job. And if the person, it didn't matter if it was a man or a woman interviewing, but if they wore a shirt saying, I code, therefore I am, the woman didn't want to work there. And if they didn't wear that shirt, regardless of whether the interviewer was man or woman, they did want to work there, and in broad brush strokes. And so one of the things that I think is really important is the recruiting process and making sure that we don't look like it's an exclusionary club. That all, you know, there's many ways of being interested in tech. You don't just have to want to be an engineer. You might be interested in iPhones, and that's you're interested in tech, purely user interface design, making life easier. Or maybe you're interested in IT. So one of the things is it's just the brass tacks of let's make the job look really interesting, and let's make sure that where we find the really good candidates, whether they're men or women, it doesn't matter, that we are actually recruiting to find something that's interesting to them. So that's one of the things I would say is recruiting efforts. Let's see, other parts of the question?
So on your team, what does that makeup look like? Are there any differences for you in how you develop or train women?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's not, I wouldn't say I necessarily would develop or train women differently than men. But I would say absolutely training is individualized, especially, you know, you're going to have people in all departments and all walks of life that are your stars. You know, you look for who are my stars, and the first thing that I always look for is that flexibility, the versatility. Is this person interested in more than one thing? Are they interested in doing different sorts of things? Because that breadth as a manager gives you so much flexibility. When you know that this person can do their job, but they've also kind of been doing someone else's job or learning about the business generally, that's something that, you know, it's when you see it, it's a pretty exciting thing. And so one of the things I encourage too, you know, I jump from law, but I encourage at all levels, men and women, to try new jobs. It's okay if the finance guy wants to go to care. It's okay if the marketing person wants to try product. You might go a little more junior, or you might not, because you're just someone that we want to invest in. And so getting that kind of training around the building and not saying you're in finance, I don't want to poach that finance person, but instead encouraging all the managers to view that they don't own people. They're taking care of them until they move on to the next, you know, part of their learning process. So to me, that I look for the flexibility, the versatility. We started a new grad rotation program where one of the things is people were hesitant to hire new grads because of the more intensive training required to bring them up. And so we started a program that said, okay, don't worry about it, doesn't hit your budget. We're just going to go 4 months, 4 months, 4 months, or 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, something like that. And they'll cycle, new grads can cycle through departments and learn the departments, and we'll take responsibility for mentoring and training. And at the end of the year, they're going to be great. They're going to have learned all aspects of the business, 3 to 4 different departments. So anyway, so that's one thing that trying to bring, making sure that everybody gets that breadth of experience. I will say another thing that, you know, you look for is kind of the selflessness that when you have someone who's both flexible and not overly concerned with, you know, where's my office, or I don't want to take that because it's beneath me, but just kind of has the I'll do anything I can do to help attitude. Doesn't matter when or where. I mean, that is also sort of golden. Team play, you know, you don't want to use cliches, team player and collaborative and all that stuff, but there is something to be said with someone who will just help out on any project.
Yeah. So that leads us into our next question then, for women or men in the room who are looking
Mm-hmm.
to transition or move up within their roles. What's your biggest advice that you would give them?
I would say you can't decide in your mind, this is advice, take it for what it's worth, but you can't decide in your mind that you're going to do something else and expect everyone to be excited about that idea if you haven't put the effort into actually learning it. So I would say if you got this idea that maybe you want to try something else, whether, you know, just a new challenge, a new role, transfer jobs, is to get out in front and learn it first. And people are surprisingly open, I don't know, at our company, to just teaching and learning and just say, I'm just curious, I'd like to learn about this. If you've already kind of put the time in to learn the thing that you want to do on your own time, I think that goes a huge long way. That would be one thing. And the other thing is, it takes risk for sure to try something new. When you're good at this thing and you want to go try that thing, and having the right type frame of mind, I guess, towards that new and scary thing, as opposed to like, what if I fail? What if I get fired because I fail and I suck at my new job? But instead, you know, failure's interesting, right? I mean, it's super interesting. Success is not super interesting. You can be stated in a sentence, right? I did X, and everybody goes, that's great. Failure, on the other hand, usually has a great story behind it. And when I mean, I can share like a ton of them, and you know, I gotta tell you, it's like my favorite job interview question, and I know it puts people off when I say, let's talk about your failures, because people are thinking, aha, they're trying to ask that weakness question, and here I'm going to say I'm an overachiever, or you know, something like that. But really, what I'm looking for is an interesting story and if you can tell an interesting story, you've obviously had introspection about it, right? You've reflected on it, internalized it, and you've probably got a lesson learned that nobody else has relating to that particular thing. So if you had something bad happen, you reflected on it, you learned, and then you can say how you adjusted to avoid it. I mean, that to me is the ultimate. You know, that's fantastic. And then on top of it, if you can have a sense of humor about it and maybe tell it in a funny way, that means you're probably pretty good under stress, or you've got good perspective. When you look back and you say, yeah, it was a complete disaster, but I learned a lot, but you know, hey, I won't do that again. And I've had people tell me, by the way, interviewing for technical positions, that they've taken entire networks down for an hour and caused blackouts, and you know, the point where you're like, well, wow. Thanks for sharing, but it's always a good story.
So speaking of sense of humor, we talked at lunch about the fact that you have a 13-year-old daughter, and what skills girls learn through school and then into their very beginning of their career. And can you talk a little bit about what we were talking about earlier, and like for your daughter, what you're trying to impart on her and for other professional women?
Yeah, so we had an interesting conversation. You know, part of what I think is cultural about some of the issues at the top not having enough women is that the skills that are being taught in the school, and this is just completely my own opinion, of course, is that girls are being taught at a young age that if you take good notes, you turn in your homework on time, you get 100% on a quiz, you will get an A, and that is a great outcome. And I think that strategy works for a very long time, and it gets reinforced time and time again. And what we see is that girls do graduate high school in greater numbers than men, and with higher class ranks, same thing in college, and that they get jobs pretty equally out of college, and then something happens. And my interpretation of that is the skills you need to learn in grammar school are not note-taking and not checking boxes and turning things on time. They're things like risk assessment and risk-taking. There are things like self-confidence to take insults and jokes, the way I see my son's friends doing to him, over bad grades on tests, and not taking it personally and instead getting stronger and emboldened from it. Maybe doing things that are unconventional, and maybe even there's a little more tolerance for quote-unquote being bad. And sometimes being a little mischievous and bad is okay if the source of that mischievousness is curiosity and challenging authority, where authority deserves to be challenged, right? You just don't want a kid who constantly gets in trouble with their teachers, but sometimes authority needs to be challenged. And I don't think there's a culture amongst the girls of challenging their teachers when there's wrong, or demanding, or getting risk-taking sort of skills in grammar school and high school. So one of the things that, for me, teaching my daughter Ella, is to think about, don't be too worried. We want to get good grades, but we also want to do things that are interesting, regardless of whether the school says they're interesting. Doing things your own way. If the assignment is this, go and argue with the teacher that it should be that. And trying to ingrain those skills. I don't think it's necessarily something that can be done by, simply saying, go do this. But, I look at the natural, I look at the building blocks, right? And you say, well, girls don't go into STEM stuff as much. Is that because they're interested in different things? And my daughter is, but it's kind of just the same. It is STEM, but you don't recognize it. So I'll give you an example. She loves social media. She's got like 700 followers, okay? I don't know how, she's very careful, and I only let her, I only let people follow her if they're girls, verified girls, or she knows them. So she's, so that's her thing. But, she actually has a Facebook tracker, or I'm sorry, this is Instagram metric tracker. It's a separate app that tracks her metrics. And this dashboard is as sophisticated as anything we do in marketing. And she will say things like, I can't follow this person because it'll screw up my metrics. My ratio of followed to followers, you never want to go over 1.0, And so she knows this stuff cold. She does the calculations in her head, off the dashboards, and, her ratio of likes to followers. And she'll start deleting posts if the ratio isn't high enough. I mean, I'm not even kidding. You tell me that isn't STEM related, but it doesn't look like it, right? The stuff that she sees in math doesn't look like following her metrics and doing the math in her head and those kind of calculations. So I think there's a lot of ways that STEM is right there waiting for us, but the way it's being positioned with girls, especially, and boys who just aren't liking the way, it is not engaging enough. And I think if we were to really change some of the way we are feeding women into tech and feeding men who do not naturally fall into the model that is currently being taught in, is to change the way we're fundamentally teaching this stuff.
So we go to school, we learn this way, we check the boxes in college, and then we graduate. What skills would you recommend a young professional or even someone at any point in their career work on to kind of get outside that comfort zone of just checking boxes?
Yeah, so how do you get that risk, especially if it's not innate, right? Not everybody wants to graduate college with massive loans and start taking huge risks in their career. I certainly understand that. I think part of it is, so if you're at a company, the first thing is another thing I would say I look for as a manager is to learn the company. Can you find some area of the company that you're just going to learn about the business so you can speak on behalf of the business? Taking risks without getting that background knowledge is simply folly. But where you have the background knowledge, you'll be able to make the more calculated risks as to what you can take, the project you can stretch on because you've already learned your company inside and out, or the area that you want to take risks in. So I would say, it sounds so pedantic to say, do your homework and learn the business, but there really isn't any replacement for learning the business. And then the other thing that I've kind of done, I don't know that it's necessarily great advice, but I love game theory. One would not think as a lawyer or whatever that game theory would be, completely relevant, but take your favorite thing and make it relevant. So game theory to me has actually been hugely relevant in negotiating and predicting outcomes of anything from a product to competitor actions. So I think there is a lot of connections you can make with your favorite thing, the thing you actually like to do that may be a little geeky or esoteric, and bringing that in to the workplace. And just the fresh perspective, I think everyone will appreciate it.
Okay, great.
Does anyone have any questions thus far?
No questions?
We're at a fireside chat, guys. Yes.
So, there's always rumors about Dish, merging or acquiring, and granted, a lot of those rumors are not true, but in the case where we do merge or acquire, and you went from WildBlue to ViaSat, what helped that merger be successful, and particularly successful for you?
So it's a great question because if first of all, there's a very different vantage point depending on whether you're the acquirer and the acquired. And now having been on kind of both sides, I do think that when you're the acquirer, there is a natural tendency to think your own employees are the more skilled, or that if any employee is going to say it's going to be that one. Having said that, the reality of any merger is a huge part of what the acquirer is buying is the talent of the employee base. And the worst thing is to watch that brain drain happen. I'll say there's one large merger that we're getting an awful lot of resumes from the acquired company, and the talent's deep, and I think it's just a huge mistake of the acquirer company. It's probably relevant to this company too, not to be doing more to retain their best employees. So I think one is, there is some confidence that the acquirer has got to have some knowledge that they're looking to keep the best talent. The reality is where your job is totally redundant. That can be a scary situation. The versatility can help. I switched jobs a bit when we got acquired by ViaSat. One thing is actually to be, if you can get your voice heard through your supervisor or direct or whatever. One thing that surprised me as a manager is a lot of people aren't super ambitious or want to stay with the merger or are open to changing jobs. Just letting that be known, I think, is important. Some people are kind of going, I'll take a package. And it's not easy to see who those people are. You do have to ask the questions, so making sure that your intentions are known, I think, is in a merger situation. So there's kind of that initial wave. As far as after, I got to say, the advice, there was a lot of discontent at WildBlue just over the transition and the decisions. And our president came and sat down and said, whatever you feel today isn't going to be true 3 months from now or 6 months from now. Everything changes in a merger. And so I guess that would be the other thing. If you guys did have some corporate transaction and you're part of the team that goes forward, whether you're acquired or acquiring, it changes so much in that year, and it is true. It may get better or worse, but certainly if it's bad, it's probably not going to, whatever it is, it's not going to be the same 6 months later. So that feeling of just kind of waiting and being patient and just enjoying the ride more, because you don't always get wild rides at your career, but just saying, I can enjoy this is something I'll go through and have perspective. Maybe it's a failure, maybe I laugh later, maybe we get that learning experience, or maybe maybe it just gets better. But it's hard, I know that.
And you touched on retaining the top talent, whether it be the acquired or you're acquiring.
Yeah.
But how do you develop talent? How do you personally bring someone up within an organization and develop them to be a top talent?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, and one is, of course, you got to give feedback. I mean, that's just sort of talent 101 is you don't want someone to feel unappreciated, and give them the strengths and the weaknesses sort of thing. Two, you got to open up opportunities, and that does improve saying, God, I love this person in analytics, but it's actually a better opportunity to go to IT, and you have to be open to looking around the company, and if you don't have a spot for that person to move up, you got to find a spot, or lateral, because the smartest people, the best people, like to switch up their jobs every 2 years. I think that if there's no opportunity, it's just a stale job, they're going to find it in another company. So you might as well open it up, or create positions. And then just, I'm a pretty big advocate of giving the harder job, but then kind of coaching the person through with some actual substantive advice. I will tell you one story about, I had read a story about how a doctor, a really esteemed doctor, actually nearing the end of his career, had another doctor, or at the height of his career, had another doctor who was retired. They decided to work out something where the first doctor wanted to know how to improve his game. He felt like he was at the top of the game. So he had the second guy literally follow him throughout surgeries and patient consultations, and then at the end of the day, just like give him brutal feedback as to how he could improve, because he had kind of run out of ideas himself. And the feedback was really hard to take, but it truly worked. And so I said to my old boss at the time, this is a couple years ago, we should try this. Because getting real-time feedback, there's no better way to improve your game. And I'm telling you, it takes a huge amount of self-confidence to do this. And so we decided we would go through meetings, and we would take notes and critique each other as to what we could do better and how we could communicate more effectively. And so we did it. And I gotta tell you, again, this is something not for the faint of heart. So we sit down afterwards, and I look at his notepad, it's like, this long, and I had like 2 things for him. So I went first. I was like, well, you interrupted the speaker like 2 or 3 times, and gave him the example. And so it was his turn to critique me. And he said, well, the first thing is the way you're talking. He said, you're saying right at the end of a lot of your words. He said, you sound unsure, immature, like you're seeking approval or something from someone. I said, okay. So I've disabused myself of right. I mean, after that, and believe me, it was a one-time thing. I don't think I ever said it, but one other time, and I felt like a bolt of lightning hit me when I said it. The other thing he said, one of the other many things, was that I said And now that I say this, you're going to notice it. And I said, well, this is a hard one, because everyone says And he said, well, you said it like 8 times. I said, okay. So we said the next time, he said, this is going to be hard. It's going to be an ongoing thing. Why don't I signal you in meetings when you say I said, fine. So this is a bad idea, by the way. So, I mean, at first he was kind of like, yeah, okay. I think it devolved into texting me at one point in the middle of the meeting, 5 I would literally get a text. and it would lead to conversations in the hall like, you're not even trying. I know, it's disruptive. So, but the moral of the story is, I mean, that kind of feedback is essential. I mean, and putting yourself through it and telling other people that you're willing to put yourself through it, giving what annoying speech habit do I have, that kind of thing. There may be little tiny tweaks in the way you present or the way you're in meetings that are making you ineffective that are not even that hard to hear about, that can make all the difference in the world. So that's one of the things is sometimes I have to, when I'm giving feedback to people, I always have to remember they probably don't know. And let's just get over that. And I know I'm not great at saying it in a way that's like super gentle, but you gotta say it. You gotta say it real time. And if nobody's giving you that feedback, ask a friend coworker to just do it if you can. And you might be surprised. I was really surprised by the right thing. So,
Kate, you're following me around tomorrow. And what else do you do to develop top talent?
Let's see. So another thing is there's also no substitute for some good training, real training. So we try to do a couple times a year, and I know DISH does similar sorts of training things, interesting types of assessments. So we did emergenetics. Have you guys done that? Emergenetics, it's kind of like the Myers-Briggs thing, the personality test, where you learn if you're social or analytical or conceptual. And so doing things like that where you pull people out of the office and in smaller groups, that it's a privilege to join these groups. And you give them insight, and again, it's about insight into your own personality. The best people, if you're someone who's intent on improving yourself, you'll internalize the advice or the strengths and realize, I'm not as much as a people person. I'm coming out real low on the interpersonal skills level. Maybe I can do X, Y, Z. So we do that, the actual formal training programs. We support going on, whether it's to a conference or other thing within reason. And then, of course, access to a variety of management. So I make sure that for people who have indicated the curiosity and are doing good things to progress, that I bring them out to Carlsbad and they are going to present in front of our CEO and president. And I'm not going to put them out there without helping and walking through it, but they got to get out and do it, and then giving them the real feedback about how it went.
That's great.
Fascinating. So let's shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
For your personal career, do you have any kind of inspirations or women that you've modeled your career after? Any personal heroes?
I would say, okay, so as to like kind of heroes, I don't know if I'd use that term. Some of the industry people that I think are super exciting, of course, Elon Musk. I mean, how can you not look at what he's done and not be pretty darn impressed? I gotta tell you, it's not a hero sort of thing, but what I would say that like people like John Oliver and satirists and other people who comment, op-ed type commentators, that's almost like my relaxing time, and I totally appreciate those people for doing what they do and learning about the world in a way that is humorous and interesting, to tie into what we said before. As far as like the women in industry, I gotta tell you, I am super fascinated with the women that are in the news. It drives me bananas that they are in the news so much, like the Sheryl Sandbergs and the Marissa Mayer, as much as they are, because it's just, you can't read it without it being like the only reason why you're fascinated with Marissa Mayer is because she's female. Yep. But having said that, it is super interesting to watch what is written about them. You know, I mean, they'll do these complete hatchet jobs where former employees say how, you know, she had people waiting outside her office in a line to talk to her. And you just go, God, really? That's what they're going to write about? Is like somebody that got fired is going to say that she kept me waiting that one time? And so, you know, it's just really interesting to see how any normal work situation can kind of it could go either way. It could be just a totally horrible thing where, yeah, that person's completely inconsiderate, or yeah, anybody who's been let go from the company or had a bad experience could go, and these guys print it. And it's so unfair because, you know, they're in the spotlight in a way, and that puts their job in, you know, open to public debate, when really the best leaders are much more immune to what the public thinks about what they're doing, and they're acting on the best interest of the company, the employees, and the customers. So yeah, I mean, I think that those guys, you know, the team of really visible senior female leaders are super interesting to watch. I don't know that I'd want to be in that position. Every move scrutinized, you know, every interview picked apart. They have a tough job. So I think, but God, thank God they're doing it first,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, well, in the Wall Street Journal article that McKinsey did the study with Lean In about why women don't want to move into those senior level positions, it's because of the scrutiny and the added pressure that is sometimes real and sometimes perceived. So I think that's very fascinating. Have you felt any additional pressure because of that difference, or what is the leadership relationship like on your team?
So, I mean, for the most part, I would say for my role, it's probably with a, you know, company full of engineers. For me, the biggest advantage, I would say, being a woman is nobody forgets me, right? I don't have the problem of people going to ViaSat and people have forgotten, you know, who I was or whatever, because I kind of stick out a little bit. So in that sense, you can view it as a, you know, I don't like sticking out, that's a disadvantage, or you can kind of use it as they'll always remember, they always know who I am. And so it's probably worked more as an advantage so far. Certainly, you know, I don't discount in a tech company, the viewpoints, and I include myself in this, that we all have, that if you see a man and a woman and you know one's an engineer and one's an HR, I know who everybody, if they had to bet a lot of money, is going to pick which role they're in. Women do it, men do it, it's not a gender thing. I think, again, if you can switch the negative of there's not a lot of women into the positive, that I can change perceptions by, you know, maybe they thought, you know, I didn't have this job, and you know, change the perception there. There's a lot of a mental game, I would say, about viewing as an advantage rather than as a disadvantage. I think that actually tech is quite open to women once you're here. It's actually the part about getting us interested and making sure that the opportunities are there that's harder.
Yep.
So at a recruitment level,
Yeah.
some recruiters, people here, how do you recruit more women into the tech industry? We talked a little bit about within the early stages of their education, but when we're out recruiting, we talked a little about that at lunch too, about how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't any substitute for when the candidate comes into the office, what they see. And so because if you start all men, and you want to bring it into a more diverse workplace, and I include all kinds of diversity, not just gender in there, there isn't any substitute for them walking the halls and seeing this is a really cool, diverse looking group of people, all ages, all, you know, ethnicities, all gender diversity. Maybe you have people who looks conservative versus look a little bit wilder. I mean, when I see that in our office, I feel really proud. And, you know, that we can find that everybody can be happy. You know, it makes, like, I don't know if you guys know that when I literally see two people I didn't know were friends walking to lunch together, like, I just always feel pride that, like, the company that they were able to find each other, and maybe they're having a good time that day. So for me, that's where it starts, is we gotta do that. So then if you're not that, how do you become that? And the process is, you know, it's not fast. You gotta come in, you might have to recruit a little harder, reach out in the companies instead of just, especially for ViaSat, posting something on a website. And then, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, you don't want to, that you carefully design the interview slate to recruit, right? We're in recruitment mode. This is a tight job market for sure. And I want to make sure that the person feels really comfortable. And I'm always, if this job isn't right for them, let's make sure they interview with some really good people, because maybe we'll just say, but could you do this job over here? So that's where it starts at kind of the ground floor level. And then, once we're here, I feel like we do a pretty good job once you're in the system of, again, just making opportunities open to everyone in the training and the feedback.
So before we open it up to questions, let's leave off with one actionable thing that either you do or that you recommend people doing every day to advance their career in the future.
So the point where you're most visible, for those of you who don't have jobs that are mostly, by yourself in front of the computer, to the extent you're in meetings, the most, I would say, I don't mean to say this overly negatively, but I would say the most kind of career problematic thing I see is meeting behavior. So the laptop's open. I mean, it's just such a bad thing to go to a meeting and for me to see people on their laptops. So, I started just looking at what people are doing on their laptops, and it's like almost not even ever crucial work. I've seen people surfing, I've seen people just staring at their email. And so I think you're on stage in a meeting, and your participation is why you were invited. And even if you're saying, I'm just there to get a status, and I know that for our group, that's a lot of times they're just there to make sure they're in the loop. I don't care. Make sure you participate in meetings. Just think of a question to ask. Issue spot, just make it a game. What can I find that's wrong here? And then a game to say it in a very constructive way. But if you go through meetings and you find that you haven't said a word the whole time, that fact is noted in the meeting. And I watch very carefully who is only narrow and speaking for themselves, and they say, oh, but I can't do that. I can't train in that quick a time period. And who is speaking questions that I should have thought of, that person's thought of for me and done me a massive favor, and they're engaged. And so that would be, I would say, the biggest thing, just putting down the laptop and the computer and talking, speaking up. If you have a concern, and it's okay if you look, if the question's dumb, it's okay. You still spoke up, and that's still a victory. And then it's funny, right? When you ask, you can have perspective later and talk about it. But that would be the single thing I think that people overlook.
Good. Okay, let's open it up for some questions. If you guys don't have any, we can keep going. But before we wrap up, let's just open it up and let you guys. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. As a successful career woman, how do you balance your personal life and your work life?
It's hard. There's no two ways about it to say that having kids and a full-time job is easy. First of all, I clear my schedule on the weekends. I don't do anything. This is not a recipe for everyone, but we do very little socially with friends without kids. It's completely focused on the kids and doing things as a family. We don't necessarily get cars every year or do things like that, or furniture or things like that. Where we spend our money is we make sure we take a family vacation. And that's been really important for us, whether it's just to Winter Park or something a little bit bigger. And that pulls the kids out, that makes sure we have family time. So, and I would say too is, the house isn't that clean. There's a lot of things that need to, and I just let it go. And my husband too. Sometimes we just don't worry too much about it. Yeah, we know the gutters need to be fixed. Yeah, we know all those things, but we just make sure that after work, it's completely prioritized time. We use TV company here. We conform to the kids to make sure if they want to watch Modern Family or John Oliver or whatever, we sit down and watch it with them. So, and that's, everything else falls away, and I can't say I have, other than the family and the job, I can't say I do anything else well at all. Most things are in shambles. I'll get past due bills, and I'm like, God, I'm not this kind of person. I pay, but I've just kind of let it fall aside. And that's been what I can live with. Not everybody could probably live with a slightly too messy house and, all those kind of things. But, other than getting other help in, and all the bills are paid electronically, just trying to clear my life of any other clutter.
Hi, I'm Jamie Burnett. I'm in the legal department. I I understand that there are a lot of people in our legal department who know you and have negotiated with you. And Mary Catherine said hi. James.
Oh, thanks.
So my question to you is, so you talked about the importance of being flexible and being able to switch jobs, and you obviously did that. Do you have what made you decide to go more the business route, and do you have any regrets about leaving the legal side of things?
Yeah, good question. I think it's also, I know I get bored after about 2 years. I kind of have a clock. And so I prioritized change over doing exactly what my interest was. I just figured new and different and maybe a little scarier was going to be more interesting for me. And I kind of played out the law thing, like I'd done it. Was there going to be something that was going to make me super, like, this is crazy, this is super different and interesting? And so for me, I kind of had this 2-3 year clock in mind that I need to do something different. And I don't care if it's a step back, a step sideways, I don't care at all. But that was my goal, was different, because I knew that would keep me interested, and kind of I couldn't do anything by rote. I would have to learn it all fresh. So that's kind of that's why I wanted to change. As far as leaving law behind, in a business, you don't leave it behind. You can be, my legal team loves it when I give them, lists of, kind of a fully baked term sheet. So I would just say I don't have an official title, but to the extent I want to do more, get more involved in some of the stuff that, the strategy or the negotiating, it's still there. So the goal, I think, is always to transition in a way that you can apply those skills in a way that's different. And even if it's, internally negotiating with my engineers over what project they're going to do, it's kind of the same. Yeah.
I'm Becky Magnotta, and I'm in our Leadership and Organizational Development Department.
Hey, Becky.
I loved what you said about feedback. And I'm curious about a couple things. One is your own personal development, besides that, and also how can you reinforce others to seek feedback like you did?
So just my own personal development in terms of?
As a leader.
Oh, okay. So, it's so cliche, but you got to find someone who you can look at and say, I can learn from this person. And bad examples are good too, for sure. And just adjusting to be different, finding your own way. And then, finding the good example. And you'll always have to adjust the good example. And I had a really good example to pattern myself off of someone who was an excellent leader, whose style I could never be like, by the way. He, and it's the same guy who, the right, who, is very direct in meetings and says, it's a terrible idea, we need to do something different, but yet it works for him. I know that would never work for me. No one would listen to me if I approach things like that. So, being observant and just, doing things and, finding the person, observing, reflecting, and making adjustments and then getting feedback, I would say, is how I've kind of done it. I've never turned down, like, even a ridiculous business trip that is, if it's with, like, my CEO and he's speaking at a conference and maybe all I'm doing is kind of prepping him and I could send him, I would never turn it down because it's always the learning experience. So I think even though you don't feel like traveling, I have kids, you just push yourself to do those things. As far as encouraging others for feedback, the root ability to do that is having self-esteem and self-confidence. And it is hard to do that, but I think if people just see it as it's a natural stepping stone to getting better, and you just don't get better without taking that kind of feedback. I think that helps. You can't say to someone, you're not doing very well, why don't you do this? Why don't you get more feedback? It has to be more positive. You're on the right track. You can really up your game by, improving this and this and this. But I think part of it is it's the self-confidence to be able to handle the criticism. And if there is a fundamental insecurity about one's role, I think it may be too tough a challenge. Hi.
How do you deal with direct reports that maybe have a very different people management philosophy than yours?
It's a great question. Because of course it's going to happen, right? Nobody's going to have exactly your people management philosophy. One thing is you always want to have we don't observe the org chart, like you can't talk to my people or you must copy me on an email. So, and I have absolutely insisted upon that with everyone. I mean, I tell all my direct reports, by the way, you need to have a relationship with my boss that's all your own. Do not depend on me or think you're copying me on all of it. Go figure out how to do that. When you're in Carlsbad, go sit down with him and meet with him one-on-one, and you know what? You can talk about me. I give you permission to talk about me behind my back, so to speak, because I want you to have an outlet. I want you to be able to have that conversation about how you might write things. So one thing is making sure, you know, that philosophy is different, but if you isolate that person and that person has a siloed group where they're just the king of the, you know, they're king of their group, and I kind of watch that person, no, that's not going to work. What's much better if I know their team, I know my direct reports team, and they can come to me if they're having trouble, if they don't like it, they can come to me with positive feedback. We have lunch together too. And my direct report has with my boss. So it's sort of a check on the system with anyone who is under that person has different outlets, you know, to say, I like this style or I don't, because I'm not always the best person to judge whether it's being effective or not on the team. But if I can talk to the team myself one-on-one and they know I'm not selling out their boss, right? We're all here trying to get better, then I think you get that trust and things surface. You know, this wasn't effective when you know, had the team go off and do this on and off site. They ended up getting nothing done. You know, I can make those adjustments, but I think the key is having a relationship all up and down the org chart and not saying you can't talk to this person, you know, one-on-one without me, about me. And practicing what you preach, right? I mean, anyone can, you know, anyone should be able to talk to anyone, and you know, you gotta like actually live up to that.
So what I gathered was you were saying whether you're a student or a professional, just don't be a yes teacher, yes boss person, question the authority. And how do you draw a line, like how far do you go and what's the best way? Like how do you oppose, you know?
Yeah, how do you know when it's risk is folly and when risk is actually the winning recipe? And I think that, first of all, the best thing is to start young with taking those small risks and trying to figure it out. The other thing, you know, I heard something about, you know, entrepreneurs, what makes entrepreneurs good, they often think it's risk taking. But if you ask the entrepreneurs, they think their strategy is actually the safest strategy because they have gone back, they have mapped out all the alternatives in their mind, and they think their strategy, you know, which may be to launch, you know, rockets or do things, is actually much safer than doing nothing, right? And so to me, the risk assessment, and again, I like the game theory and the other stuff, is to take a step. You have to map out the do nothing scenario. And that's where I think it becomes obvious that the do nothing scenario might be untenable in your mind. I'm gonna have, if I just do my check the box, turn it in, get my A, every day, I am probably going, over 5 years, I will move up one rung to my boss's position, and I'm probably, would I move up two with that strategy? Probably not. Is that an acceptable situation? So if you look at it from that perspective, like that's totally unacceptable, then it becomes way less risky to do things to communicate, you know, I want to take on an interesting new project, I want to apply for a job, internal transfer that, you know, my boss might find out, my boss might not like it. But in the do nothing scenario, it's even worse. So I think you start with small risks, right? I mean, but the risk, you got to have the risk assessment to be able to do the risk is the short answer. And I think there's like a lot of actually interesting reading about people, you know, learning from other people who have been in a similar situation and what the options are. You don't have to like think it through yourself entirely.
Sarah?
As a leader, what's been the smallest change or decision that you've made that's had the biggest impact?
That's a good one. Oh gosh. I wish I had had that question, time to think about that question before. You know, I'll tell you one of the smallest changes that I think is gonna have one, and maybe I'll think of a better answer. We don't have food on site in Denver, 450 employees. And they keep telling me it's too hard, it's food services and stuff. It's a small change to put hot food in a building, and I feel like it's just massive to employee, good food, by the way. It would be a massive change to employee welfare and would actually change things. In terms of other things, other small things, I don't know, I can't think of like a little thing that had a huge impact right now. It's a great question though.
Well, good. Stick around if you guys want to chat. Thank you all for coming. We are working on planning our member holiday party, which is scheduled for December 3rd. So that will go out to the member distro. If you're not on that and you would like to be, you can sign up on dishwomensnetwork.com. If you scroll partway down the page, there's a member sign up form, or you can email us at womensnetwork@dish.com. So we'll be having that over at Clock Tower for you guys, and should be a good networking opportunity and time to spread some holiday cheer. So thank you, Lisa, for coming in.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for
Thanks,
coming
Paris.
last minute.